In the beginning, before light, before language, there was a quiet that trembled, not the soft hush of a sleeping child, but a silence that seemed to listen back, as if the void itself were holding along. Uncertain breath, darkness stretched in every direction, so vast it felt less like space and more like a cradle waiting for its first occupant. Nothing had shape. Nothing had memory. The waters below were still yet not fully still, a faint shiver running through them like something starting to dream without knowing how. Above, the darkness swelled gently, as though a great chest rose and fell in the slow rhythm of something deciding whether to wake. Edges dissolved into infinity. Boundaries blurred into the idea of boundaries. It was a world that had not yet learned to want, and yet something waited. Not with tension, but with the patience of roots growing through soil we'll never see. The air, if air it could be called, was heavy with possibility. A moment before a storm, a breath before a word. Then a presence hovered, not walking, not flying. Not speaking, simply there, ancient, aware, older than anything time would later claim. Its touch slid across the surface of the deep like a hand searching for a heartbeat in someone drifting too far into sleep. If the void could feel, it might have shuddered, not from fear, but from the realization that it was no longer alone. The presence remembered what this emptiness could become. Stars blooming like promises, trees whispering stories into leaves, joy bright enough to rival dawn, and sorrow heavy as rain. All of it existed in potential. None of it had yet taken shape, but here, in this untouched quiet, there were no names, no warnings, no echoes of future grief, only the breath, a long inhale, drawing in the ancient stillness as though gathering a child after a long night, and a slower exhale, soft as a lullaby for someone not yet conceived. The water stirred, a rhythm formed old as creation itself, gentle as ripples spreading from a single fingertip. Shapes nearly appeared, then melted back into the deep. Letters without language, echoes without sound. Above them, the darkness thickened, not fleeing the coming change, but rearranging itself as if preparing to open unseen eyes, not because it wished to see, but because the breath wished to be seen. This was the first stirring of intention. Not creation. Not command. Just the subtle shift had happened when a sleeping world realizes it is being dreamt of. Presence leaned closer like a storyteller pausing over a blank page, feeling the weight of the first line before it is spoken, still silent, still impossibly gentle. A gentleness that was almost frightening base of the power it restrained. And into that vast cradle of dark, the breath whispered a thought. Not yet word, not yet light, only a spark, the smallest, desire for a beginning, a longing for more. And in that moment, the void was no longer void. It did not yet know what beauty or heartbreak would one day rise from it. It did not know that every end in the world would mourn beckon. Here in darkness, learning to hope, the deep held its breath, not in fear, but in wonder, the wonder of waiting for a word strong enough to split the silence. What would that first word be? Light? Sky, sea? Or something gentler, naming a division, an invitation for form to rise from formlessness? The breath lingered, savoring the hush, letting anticipation gather like mist rising from a hidden spring. Time itself began to unfurl slow, deliberate, the first creation, bare creation, and so the waters waited with it. No longer empty, but heavy with promise, full of the echo of a breath that would soon change everything. Let there be light. The words did not tear through the darkness like a blade or a command. They came softly, a breath released after an eternity of waiting. A whisper that brushed the edge of the void. The way early dew rests on a leaf that has never known sunlight. And in that gentle exhale, the darkness loosened. Not banished. Not conquered. Simply Invited to step aside. Light arrived quietly, not as a blinding storm, not as a roar that devoured every shadow, but as a shy bloom, pale gold, soft silver, stretching out across the deep like small fingers, feeling their way toward their first morning. It touched the waters, and the still surface broke into a thousand trembling reflections. Each shimmer looked like a secret, a possibility the void had once dreamed of, but never dared to shape. The light was warm, like a gentle hand on a fevered brow. Yet within that warmth was a strangeness, something new, unfamiliar, as if the light itself was unsure how bright it wished to become. Beneath it, the waters stirred. They rippled with a new awareness, as though learning what it meant to be seen. From the unseen deep, bubbles rose and burst into tiny prisms, short-lived, colors that disappeared as quickly as they formed. The darkness did not flee. It simply withdrew to the edges, folding itself like an old storyteller stepping back so younger. Voice could speak. Still present, still essential. Still watching. For light and darkness were not enemies yet. They were the first companions, the first contrast, the first pair to paint meaning onto a blank canvas. The presence observed their dance, its awareness drifting like smoke from a hidden fire. Satisfaction hummed through the deep, not a sound, but a resonance you feel in your ribs, as if the waters themselves were cognized the beauty of the very first division. Yet even within that beauty was a faint warning, a quiet knowing that light, once born, might one day burn too fiercely, and shadows would one day darken places where hearts tremble. Still, the breath exhaled again. Gently. Deliberately. Separating light from darkness like curtains. Partetto. Welcome morning. Day was born bright, warm, stretching itself awake like someone rising from a vivid dream. Night followed, velvet soft, tender, carrying the memory of the ancient silence. Ethan existed before anything had a name. The waters mirrored their rhythm. Under day, they glimmered like watching eyes. Under night, they grew still, a dark mirror holding secrets light had not yet earned the right to see. Above them, the space that was not yet sky shifted with each cycle. Blue gathered like ink in water, thickening into the dome. It would one day shelter storms and stars. Those stars waited, their fire sleeping inside them. The moon hovered unseen, only an intention not yet carved into shape. The presence lingered, gentle yet immense, like a gardener who knows that flowers will bloom, but thorns will come too. Light whispered of futures filled with wings, laughter and warmth. Darkness whispered of nests ducked safely in the unseen places still woven into tomorrow. Each division was a gift, but also a choice. To reveal. To conceal. To illuminate. To protect. The first full cycle ended, day slipping into night, night yielding to day. The deep exhaled, a long breath smelling of salt and starlight, carrying both the peace of beginning and the faint metallic tremble of what might someday shatter it. Shadows lingered. Light stretched. And beneath their harmony was a thin, uneasy thread, the truth that dawn returns only because night steps aside for it. The breath gathered again, ready for the next division, the next shaping, the next step in a story, learning how to take its first steps. The void was void no longer. It had become a canvas half painted, half waiting, alive with the promise of wonders yet to bloom and wounds yet to heal. And beneath it all, the waters murmured softly, their ripples forming shapes like letters and a language in it, yet spoken whispering hope, hunger, and the quiet ache of everything the world was destined to lose in love. Let there be a vault between the waters, to separate water from water. The words did not fall like commands. They slipped into the deepest softly as a breath brushed against a sleeping child, a murmur gentle. An auto coax a world into shifting without fear, and the waters listened. The surface trembled first, quivering like someone waking from a dream they aren't ready to leave. Then, from the heart of the deep, a mist began to rise thin at the start, barely more than a size-gaping open lips, but it grew. Mist thickened into cloud, cloud gathered into a veil, and the veil spread outward until it stretched. From one end of the horizontal, the other a great, shimmering arch drawn across the newborn world. This was the firmament, dome breathed into being be the presence itself, woven from light vapor, and silenced dot silver in the dawn, blue in the day, violet in the retreating dusk, a canvas shifting with every whisper of the breath. Dot it lifted the upper waters gently, holding them back like hands pressed against trembling tears, not to deny them, but to teach them patience, a promise that one day thee would fall as rain, soak the soil, fill the rivers, and become a chorus that the future earth would learn to sing with. Below the vault, the sea settled. Dot, no longer stretching into endless dark. They gathered themselves, rivers forming in the deep, currents swirling with quiet anticipation. Like stories waiting for their first listener, the presence watched the separation, its awareness drifting like a ripple across the new architecture. The balance was delicate, a held breath, a suspended heartbeat, a fragile piece between weight and lift. Between pressure and release. Light filtered across the vault, fracturing into faint rainbows, bridges of color between the known and the not yet. And when night came, the dome darkened into velvet shadow, holding the first waiting stars like secrets cupped in gentle hands. The waters below murmured softly, their rhythm steady, a sound of boundaries being understood, the comfort of knowing where one ends and another begins. Yet, beneath that peace lay a whisper of tension, for every separation carries within it a question. What happens if it fails? Above the dome, the upper waters shifted restlessly, a hidden ocean pressing downward like a weight of unspoken thoughts. Distant rumble rolled across the vault, thunder muffled by cloud, a reminder that harmony depends in hands that choose to hold. The presence knew the risk. The deep knew it too. Its waves rose and fell in slow, steady patterns as if tracing maps not yet drawn on land, continents unborn, rivers uncarved, valleys waiting under the surface like sleeping bones. The air beneath the firmament cooled, clarifying into sharp breath. The first atmosphere. It carried the faintest scent of rain that had not yet fallen, and soil that had not yet risen. Evening soft the dome with bruised violets and slow-moving silver. Morning returned, it to gold, pouring honeyed light through the new scantle. The water's billow shimmered in quiet response. The breath lingered, satisfied but not deceived. Vaults could break, waters could rise, even beauty, when balanced too finely, could tremble on the edge of its own undoing. Still, the presence hovered, gentle, terrible, patient, ready for the next division. Earth from sea, green from dust, life from breath. Creation was no longer a single act. It had become a conversation, a slow unfolding of intention meeting possibility, light meeting shadow, and silence learning how to speak. And so the world waited. The waters whispered. The sky held. And creation breathed. Let the waters under the sky gather in one place, and let dry ground appear. The words drifted into the world not as a command carved in stone, but as a soft invitation, like someone gently asking a friend to step into the light after a long rest. And the waters listened. They shivered at first, their surface tremoring like a secret finale preparing to be shared. Then, slowly, they began to draw back, not fleeing, but retreating with the shy grace of someone clearing space for something new to arrive. They gathered into vast, deep basins, circling and folding into themselves, as if guided by an unseen hand. Where they withdrew, edges formed soft at first, then firm, revealing ground that had waited beneath them since the earliest breath of the deep. The land rose gently, not like a mountain tearing through earth, but like a sleeper lifting their head for the first time in morning light. Damp soil glistened beneath the retreating waves, smooth as fresh clay still remembering embrace of the water that shaped it. Then life answered the call. Grass appeared first, thin blades pushing up through wet earth, trembling as a new breeze brushed past. Shrubs followed, leaves unfolding like small hands opening to accept sunlight they had never known. Everything felt soft, watercolor-like, edges blending, colors breathing into one another as though the whole scene had been painted with gentle strokes and endless patience. The land was good worm in its newness, rich in promise, smelling of soil ready to cradle roots that had not yet formed. Rivers traced their first lines across the world, practicing their flow like young voice learning their first song. Hills rose in quiet curves, catching the early light the way a shoulder catches a whispered touch. Above it all, the air thickened with warmth and possibility. Carried within it was the faint scent of flowers yet to bloom, forests yet to rise, harvests that lived only as dreams. The presence moved over the land, touching ridge, touching root, with the gentleness of a gardener testing soil before planting the first seed. The light shimmered through the world, quiet and full, as if creation itself inhaled in wonder. Yet beneath the beauty, a subtle tension stirred. The earth felt the pull of waters beside it, understanding instinctively that stability comes with sacrifice, that to stand firm is to know what might one day break you. Grass bent in the breeze, already sensing storms that had not yet been born. Roots gripped the soil tighter, whispering ancient truths. Everything that grows will someday risk withering. Everything that rise will one day fall, but still it grew. The gathered waters shimmered like vast mirrors, holding the sky's pale dome within them, calm above, yet beneath their surface. Currents swirled with quiet ambition, dreams of coral forests, of deep trenches, of creatures who would flash so there in the shifting blue. Clouds formed overhead, soft and slow-moving, like wool drifting across a warm afternoon. They carried a promise, rain that would nourish, rain that might overwhelm, rain that would teach the earth to endure. Evening softening the colors of the London till, deep greens and lavender shadows. Morning returned with gold, stretching light across hills as if laying a warm blanket over a waking child. The presence remained, watching, savoring, listening to the hush before growth in the trembling breath after it. Creation was still becoming. Each minute, each stir of wind, each drop of water drawn into the sky was another word spoken in a long, unfolding conversation. The earth understood its own fragility, how drought could scar it, how flood could claim it back, but it also understood something deeper. Fragility and beauty have always been woven from the same thread. Insects buzzed through early, blossoms. Roots deepened. Pollen drifted like pale gold smoke across fields, still learning how to sway with the breeze. Beneath everything, the waters murmured, telling stories of depth and darkness, of unseen caverns and silent tides. The land dreamed too of mountains reaching skyward, of valleys cupping rivers like precious light, of forests whispering secrets into the dome of sky above. And the sky listened. Night scattered its stars. Tiny diamonds tossed across dark silk. Morning gathered them back into the sun. The presence exhaled. Creation breathed in. The words drifted across the earth, not like a strict command, but like warm fingers brushing soil, a quiet encouragement for life to finally open its eyes. The land, still wet from the parting of waters, trembled softly. Its surface cracked in thin, delicate lines, as though exhaling after holding its breath for far too long. Then the first green appeared. It rose gently, carefully, not bursting upward with force, but lifting itself with the shy grace of a child stepping into sunlight for the very first time. Tiny blades of grass unfurled like soft whispers becoming visible. Dew clung to their tips, catching the early light and scattering it into colors that shimmered like small, fragile miracles. Wildflowers soon followed. They painted the fields with strokes of pink, violet, gold, and deep red, a quiet celebration across hills that had never known color before. Their petals trembled in the breeze, and their pollen drifted upward like little blessings released into the air. Among them, hidden modestly, the first thorns appeared sharp, small, glinting, a reminder that beauty always arrives with a shadow dot in the valleys. Trees began to rise from the soil, their trunks straightened slowly, like someone waking from a long sleep and stretching toward the sky. Branches spread wide, leaves rustling in a soft, silky language, a voice that spoke of shade, shelter, and stories yet to come. Fruits formed on their branches, they swelled with sweetness, glowing with warm color. Inside each one beats a small heart, a seed, carrying generations of life not yet born. The land was no longer bare. It was clothed in greens, golds, soft shadows, and the perfume of new beginnings. Birds, sensing the invitation, fluttered to the branches, their early songs weaving themselves into the rustle of leaves. Even the sea beyond seemed to watch, its waves rising and falling as if answering the rhythm of the land. The presence moved quietly among it all, not with footsteps, but like warmth drifting across skin, touching leaf, stem, and fruit with quiet joy. But abundance carries weight. Some flowers wilted at the edges, reminded of the shortness of their bloom. Some fruits grew heavy, bruising under their own sweetness. Shadows pooled beneath the trees, a soft warning of what time would one day claim. Roots pushed deeper into the soil, as if preparing for the winds that would eventually rise. Insects hummed through blossoms, single-minded and tireless. Pollen floated like golden dust, part blessing, part quiet reminder that what blooms must someday fall. That evening wrapped the land in a violet haze. Morning returned with gentle gold that lit the mid-houses. If each blade of grass held a small flame within, the presence watched, content yet mindful. Nature's cycles were beautiful, but none would be gentle forever. The bloom becomes seed, the fruit becomes soil, and every gift carries its cost. Yet this did not lessen the beauty. It deepened it. For here, in this soft beginning, the world learned what it meant to grow and to risk, and the land exhaled, breathing in its new colors, its fragrance, its fragile abundance. Evening folded the world into shadow. Morning lifted it again into light. And the presence whispered once more. Creation breathed in. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years." The words drifted into the dusk like a slow unfurling banner. They swept across the heavens gently, smoothing the dome as though mending a delicate seam. The sky responded with a faint tremor, deep blue and silver, its reflection shimmering on the gathered waters below. From within that quiet arch, lights began to kindle, not in a sudden blaze, not in thunder, but in small, intentional sparks. Embers coaxed from long sleeping. Ash. The greater light rose first. It ascended with the morning's hush, a sun shaped like molten gold wrapped in a soft veil. Its warmth spilled over the land, like honey poured on warm bread. As it climbed, it carved a clear boundary between radiance and shadow, its rays threading through leaves and stitching lace-like patterns across the earth. Grasses leaned beneath its pull. Dew vanished into thin steam, rising like unspoken prayer. The seas caught the sun's glow, their waves cresting in shards of azure fire, lifting themselves as if saluting the dawn. Then came the lesser light, a moon, thin as a silver sickle at first, Waxing in a rhythm that echoed the breath itself, it hung low, and the velvet dark, its cratered face shining like memories etched into frost, its glow soft the edges of the land, turning brambles and thickets into silhouettes whispering secrets to the wind. Stars followed, they scattered across the vault like frost, shaken from an unseen hand. Millions of cold fires burning in quiet defiance of the dark. Each star sent its light from a distance so great that its arrival felt like a letter from a lover separated by oceans of time. So the night became a tapestry, threads of white and gold woven into the deep navy fabric of eternity. The presence wandered among these lights, its awareness moved like a moth drawn toward gentle flames, delighting in the order, in the way sun and moon traded the sky with practiced grace. The sun brought clarity, revealing the blush of ripening fruit, the trembling sway of grasses, coaxing growth with warm fingers of fire. The moon brought mystery, silvering leaves to reveal hidden veins, drawing out reflection in hours when the world turned inward. Yet even in such harmony, discord waited quietly. Lights divide as much as they guide. They mark boundaries, and boundaries create shadows. The sun so generous could scorch a tender shoot if it lingered too long. Its absence left the earth shivering beneath the night's cool breath, dew gathering like small, uninvited tears. The moon-beloved traveler's companion waxed and waned in patterns that hinted at loss. Its fullness mirrored the soul's many faces. Its absence echoed the original deep. The stars, indifferent in their beauty, shifted with the slow wheel of fate, guides for journeys not yet walked, calendars for festivals not yet imagined. Below, the waters reflected the celestial drama. Starlight danced along their surfaces, but their depths held a darkness no light dared to reach. Waves applauded in soft rhythm, while beneath them the abyss remained still, immense, unread. As the sixth evening wrapped the world in indigo, stars blossomed one by one like thoughts drifting up from drowsy minds. When morning returned, the sun broke the horizon in a spill of gold, renewing the earth yet again. The breath lingered among the lights, tracing their paths with gentle certainty, the sun's fire capable of both warmth and ruin. The moon's glow borrowed rather than burned, the stars' ancient brilliance that illuminated little yet endured much. Satisfaction resonated across the dome, a symphony of spheres moved in balance, though beneath it hummed a quiet dependence. Day leaned on the promise of night. Night leaned on the memory of day. All creation rested on this delicate exchange. Birds rose beneath the sun's rain, shadows skimming across meadows. Night creatures stirred under the moon's soft watch, eyes glinting with borrowed silver. The earth stretched between them, fruits swelling under solar heat, seeds dreaming under lunar calm. But the presence knew the burdens hidden behind such order. Eclipses would one day swallow the sun in a brief mockery of midnight. Meteor trails would scar the night like wounds hastily healed. Even these were part of the cost of guidance, the price of marking time in a world destined to measure its losses. The firmament, adorned with these lamps, cast fire and frost across the waters. A shifting mosaic danced upon the waves, as though fate itself mirrored its patterns on every crest and trough. Wonder deepened, not because the sky blazed, but because light and shadow waltzed with such precise and fragile grace. Wonder whispered of long journeys guided by starlight, of festivals crowned by moonrise, of years anchored to the sun's faithful arc. The seas felt the call tides rising and falling under the moon's patient hand, echoing the heart's own rhythm of ebb and return. The breath paused, the dome hummed with the chorus of creation's lamps, each light a verse, each verse a promise. Goodness settled like stardust upon the land, guiding, warming, dividing. Remembering. It blessed the world with beacons that gave direction, even as they hinted at distances they could never bridge. The world, glowing from above and from within, leaned toward the next invitation to fill the seas with swimmers, the skies with soarers, the land with walkers who would one day look up and ask the stars questions the stars would never answer. Evening scattered diamonds into the dark. Morning gathered them back in a burst of gold, the presence. Exhaled. Life, inhaled. And harmony lived, fragile as a bubble on the tide, beautiful as the school it would birth before finally bursting. Then God said, "Let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth." Across the vault of the sky, the words drifted over the surface of the deep like a warm breeze brushing across still water. Not loud, not commanding, more like a gentle invitation, soft, patient, almost playful, and the water listened. A shiver ran through the gathered seas, spreading outward in rings that shimmered under the dome's light. Currents twisted, rose, then spiraled downward again as if looking for a direction they had not known they were missing. Then from trenches older than morning, from caverns untouched by light, life stirred. Fish rose first, small shadows darting through the blue, their scales catching the sunlight in sudden flashes of emerald, sapphire, and molten gold. They moved like scattered jewels waking from a dream, turning together, breaking apart, returning again in shimmering harmony. Some were no bigger than a raindrop, others swam in slow, ponderous grace, bodies swaying like underwater lanterns drifting along ancient paths. Deeper still, the waters darkened, shapes moved in the gloom, massive, patient, solemn. Rays glided like shadows stretching their wings. Whales hummed long, resonant notes that trembled through the deep like the first music of creation. Jellyfish pulsed in silent rhythm, their translucent veils glowing faintly like memories drifting through the mind of the sea. The oceans were no longer quiet. They breathed, they sang. Bubbles streamed toward the surface, bursting with the gentle sound of secrets finally told. Seaweed swayed with a dancer's ease, brushing the sides of coral beds, forming like underwater cities. Above this awakening, the air stirred. Wind swept across the land, lifting feathers not yet fully dry. Birds burst from branches and cliff edges, wings beating in uneven but joyful patterns. Sparrows chirped their first uncertain songs. Eagles soared in widening arcs, majestic, patient, their flight tracing unseen constellations across the dome. Even the smallest birds, trembling with newness, found their place on the wind. The presence moved between sea and sky, neither seen nor heard, yet unmistakably near. Its delight drifted like warmth over the waters, rising through thermals until even the highest clouds carried traces of quiet joy. Flocks moved in synchronized waves, their cries stitching sound across the morning light. Below, schools of fish shimmered as though the ocean were rippling with laughter. But beneath the beauty, the subtle discord deepened, quiet, patient, honest. For life carried hunger from its first breath. The glittering fish would one day chase one another, not in play, but in necessity. Birds, light and free, would learn the cost of flight storms, cold. Predators waiting in the tall grass. This was not cruelty. It was the rhythm of being, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and fear. Abundance and loss. The eater and the eaten. The hunter and the hidden. Cycle that promised renewal, even as it whispered of endings. Currents dragged fallen scales and feathers downward, burying them in silt where future roots would one day drink from. Forgotten remains. The sky mirrored this truth, feathers drifting like soft confessions, settling into soil that welcomed both life and loss. As the seventh evening brushed the world in twilight violet, the dome lit with quiet approval. Stars glittered like scattered frost. The moon silvered the waves, turning each crest into a pale flame, and the waters teemed with movement shadows, sparks, flashes of iridescent life. Morning returned with warm fire, sunlight spilled across fin and feather, igniting the rhythms of the day. The presence lingered, listening to splash and cry, flutter and hum, life arranging itself into a song older than memory but fresh as the dawn. Satisfaction spread through creation like a rising tide, yet even this joy carried weight. With every fin that sliced the water, with every wing that claimed the sky, creation stepped deeper into its own cost. Life asked, and life gave. Always in exchange, but within that exchange lay resilience, instinct sharpened by fear, strength awakened by hunger, beauty born from the dance between abundance and its shadows. Birds dipped low to pluck fruit, scattering seeds across new soil. Fish chased light downward where warmth thinned and mystery thickened. Tides rose and fell, answering the moon as though its pale glow were a lullaby written only for them. The dome stretched above it all, sun and moon taking turns to guide migrations that had not yet begun. Even the stars seemed to hum some ancient promised direction for wanderers, hope for travelers, time measured not just in days, but in longing. And beneath everything, the subtle discord pulsed an honest undercurrent. To team is to thin. To multiply is to risk. To breathe is to one day fall still. The breath paused. The seas exhaled foam. Wings beat in widening arcs. Goodness settled like plankton in the tide, nourishing, multiplying, drifting wherever the currents carried it. The world, now alive with fin and feather, leaned into its next becoming toward creatures that would walk, graze, hunt, protect, toward a being shaped from dust, yet destined to look up at the stars and wonder why it was made at all. Evening gathered light into its dark. Palms. Morning scattered it back into gold. The presence exhaled. Life inhaled. Creation teemed, fragile as a bubble, brilliant as the school that shimmered before disappearing into the deep. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, the wild things, and every creature that moves along the ground." The words did not echo like thunder, rolling across mountains. They blossomed slowly, warmly, like the first fruit ripening under a newborn sun. They were spoken not with force, but with tenderness. As if creation were being invited into a secret long prepared. And the earth listened. The soil loosened, soft and warm, as though it had been waiting patient for ages for these hands to shape it. From this cradle of clay, the first man rose. He was not sculpted in rigid stone. He was shaped from living earth, his skin carrying the scent of rain-soaked soil, his bones holding the weight of ancient shells, and his blood pulsing with iron once forged in the fires of distant stars. He lifted himself slowly, breath shuddering through a chest that had only just learned what breath was. His eyes opened, light poured in like revelation, wonder followed bright, fierce, overwhelming. He moved his fingers, flexed his hands, pressed his feet into soil that remembered the tread of great beasts, yet trembled under the newness of this fragile, upright form. The garden welcomed him. Grasses brushed against his ankles like curious whispers. Trees curved gently overhead, their branches shading him with something between affection and vigilance. He walked with growing steadiness, each step imprinting a story onto soil eager to remember him. Awareness bloomed inside him, not just sight, but understanding. He saw fruit and saw the branch that held it. He saw the branch and saw the seed that birthed it. He saw the seed and knew the soil that would reclaim it someday. This was the echo of the divine image, a mirror within him that reflected both tenderness and gravity. And from his side, drawn gently, As if removing a vow hidden beneath skin came, the woman. She rose like a river, carving its way through untouched earth. Her form was strength and softness intertwined. Her breath carried a calm gravity that felt older than the clay itself. Her eyes opened, and in them the man found recognition, not learned, not instructed, but immediate and inevitable. The garden exhaled, its sweetness drifted through the fittest. Branches as if in celebration, they walked together beneath the canopy, naming creatures with voices still raw with newness. Each name fell into the air like a seed, and the world shifted slightly to receive it. Creation bowed to them, not in fear, but in partnership. Birds perched on their shoulders. Curious and weightless fish gathered near the riverbank, fins glinting in welcome. Beasts approached with hesitant trust, recognizing something familiar in these two beings of dust and breath. The presence watched them with deep and quiet delight. Clay had become likeness, dust had become reflection. And in their laughter, in the rhythm of their steps, the breath that once moved alone now echoed in two synchronized heartbeats. Yet even in this goodness shining like polished brown shadows stretched long, for in their eyes, questions had already begun forming. To rule is not only to tend, but to choose. To reflect the divine is to wrestle with curiosity, loneliness, longing, a hunger not of the body, but of the soul. An ache that had no name yet. The garden wrapped around them, lush, abundant, protective, but its very abundance hinted at boundaries, at lines, at a center, a tree that stood apart, not forbidden by cruelty, but by caution. Fruits glimmered in the shifting light, not calling to their hunger, but calling to their desire to know. To understand. To see as the divine sees. Evening stretched, shadows long across the ground. The man and woman walked hand in hand beneath the rising stars, their silhouettes sinking into the cool lavender of dusk. When morning would return, the garden would blossom again, bright, innocent, fragrant. But in the hush of night, dreams stirred, dreams shaped like questions, dreams shaped like more. The breath lingered. Satisfied. Moved. Hopeful. Yet tempered by the knowledge of what freedom truly costs. For the freedom given to them was a double-edged blessing, to guard harmony or to disrupt it. To tend the garden or to test its heart. To walk in innocence or to reach for wisdom not yet theirs to hold. For yearning gentle, trembling, barely born, is still a seed. And seeds grow. The presence felt that seed humming within them. An ache for understanding, a pull toward the center of the garden, toward the tree whose fruit gleamed with the shimmer of hidden truths. The rivers whispered of this longing, carrying its echo downstream like a quiet prophecy. Birds paused mid-song, sensing a tension that had not existed the day before. The fruits themselves blushed deeper, their skins tightening under the weight of unspoken temptation. Dominion invited judgment. Image invited imitation. Freedom invited rebellion. And all of it rested in their hands. Night deepened. Shadows pooled like ink at the roots of trees, still holding their secrets. Morning waited poised like a question about to be asked. The presence exhaled. The garden inhaled. And harmony trembled, fragile as dew on untouched skin, beautiful as the choice that had not yet been made. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" The garden rested under the thick warmth of midday. Leaves drooped like tired eyelids, and the heavy fragrance of ripe fruit hung in the air like a thought too sweet to ignore. Bees slept in shaded nests, streams whispered softly, and the world felt so still it was as though nothing could ever disturb its peace. But among the branches off, the tree set apart from all others, A subtle motion broke the quiet, a sinuous shape sliding through a dappled light with unnerving grace. It was the serpent. Its scales shimmered like green fire, each movement sending ripples of reflected sunlight flickering across the bark. It wound itself around the trunk, comfortable, certain, as though the tree belonged more to it than to the earth itself. Its eyes were pools of polished obsidian deep, alert, reflective, holding no malice, yet holding far too much understanding. The woman approached. As she often did near this forbidden place, the air here always felt different, cooler, sweeter, almost humming with a strange electricity. She reached out, brushing a leaf with soft fingers. The bark beneath them felt warm, as though something living pulsed within, and then the serpent spoke. Its voice was a quiet ribbon, sliding through the air smooth as silk over stone, gentle enough to comfort, strange enough to disarm. Did God really say, "Oh, must not eat from any tree in the garden"? The question settled on her like a feather light, but impossible to ignore. It was not accusation. It was not rebellion. It was simply curiosity. A doorway barely open, inviting her to think beyond the borders she had known. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," she answered slowly, her voice steady but touched by uncertainty's faint tremor. "But God said, you must not eat fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." The garden seemed to hold its breath. Even the breeze stilled, as if waiting for what would come next. The serpent lifted its head, scales shifting like whispered secrets. Its voice, when it came again, was almost tender. "You will not certainly die." The denial was soft, so soft it felt like reassurance, as though it were protecting her rather than urging her toward danger. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good and evil." The words glowed in the air between them, a promise wrapped in quiet brilliance. To see as the divine sees. To know what only eternity knows. Her gaze drifted to the fruit. Its skin shimmered, not merely red or gold, but something deeper, a light from within, pulsing as though the fruit itself were breathing. The world sharpened around her, the beats grazing, without understanding. The sky tracing its perfect arc, the garden endlessly abundant and suddenly painfully small. What harm could there be in wanting to understand more, to rise higher, to become a reflection of the one who formed her? The serpent watched, coil tightening gently, its patience older than the soil beneath them. She plucked the fruit. The stem snapped with a faint sound, small, delicate, yet the world shifted with it, as though something ancient had cracked. The fruit rested in her palm, cool, alive, waiting. She raised it to her lips. She bit. The taste unfurled like light sweet, sharp, wild as lightning, gentle as dawn. A tide of clarity surged through her, erasing the soft blur of innocence and sharpening every shade of the world. The man approached. Drawn by silencer, instinctor, the invisible pull of fate, he saw her eyes bright, heavy, awakened. Without question, without hesitation, he received the fruit from her trembling hand. He bit. Knowledge struck him like a chord vibrating through bone, pure, resonant, irreversible. They saw each other, and then they saw themselves. Naked. Not in body, but in truth. Vulnerability clung to them like a cold shadow. Creeping from within, shame rose like frost over skin, and innocence slipped away like breath on a winter morning. They reached for fig leaves, hands shaking, weaving coverings as if the leaves could hide heavy knowledge now burning in their veins. The garden recoiled. Leaves rustled with unease. Birds took flight and startled. Silence. Even the sunlight felt harsher, too bright, too revealing, and the serpent slid back into the shade between roots and soil, silent now, its task complete, leaving behind only the echo of one gentle question that had changed the shape of the world. The tree stood still, its remaining fruit glowing like distant embers, each one a reminder that wisdom always exacts a price, and that the cost is only revealed in the moment of tasting. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." The garden lived like a slow-breathing dream lush, enclosed, abundant. Vines curled over arching branches, and sunlight filtered through leaves and sheets of gold dust, settling on blossoms whose colors changed as the day leaned toward evening. Dot paths wound softly between groves, their earth warm beneath bare feet, carrying the perfume of fruit ripening in silence. The man and the woman moved through this, placid as though walking inside a living heart. The beasts followed them with gentle curiosity, lions rumbling in contentment, deer nuzzling their palms, birds fluttering around their shoulders as if they were the garden's own children. Every sound was harmony, every movement peace given shape, and in the midst of this peace stood two trees that anchored the garden's soul. One was the tree of life, its leaves shimmering like fragments of dawn, its fruit exhaling the scent of perpetual morning. The other stood slightly apart, quiet and dignified, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, its trunk twisted like deep thought, its apples glowing faintly from within, as if holding a secret not yet asked but always waiting. The command came softly, not as law, but as care. The presence spoke with a tenderness that wrapped itself around the couple like a warm cloak. "You may eat freely, only this tree. Do not touch. Its fruit carries a weight your hearts cannot yet hold taut." It was freedom with a boundary, mercy shaped like a warning. "You will certainly die," words spoken like truth, not threat. Like a parent whispering, "Don't step too close to the cliff." At first, the man and woman accepted this command the way one accepts morning dew, gently, without question. The garden gave them everything: sweet figs, cool water, shade that felt like a blessing, and light that felt like a promise. But even with imperfection, something small began to stir, not rebellion, not defiance, but wonder. Wonder is the first movement of desire. The woman passed the tree often as she tended the vines and gathered herbs. Some mornings she paused, not touching, not even reaching, only watching the fruit sway in the breeze with a glow that felt strangely familiar. She wondered why this beauty alone was forbidden. The garden felt the shift. Leaves slowed their rustling. Birds grew silent for a moment. Even the light seemed to gather in quiet anticipation. The man joined her sometimes, their shadows merging at the tree's roots. He touched the bark with reverence, feeling the pulse of something ancient running beneath its surface. "It is beautiful," he whispered. "Not temptation, just truth." Yet truth, when paired with longing, can become a seed. And the seed began to sprout, not in rebellion, but in curiosity's gentle ache. Nights brought dreams of distant horizons beyond. The garden's walls, of questions that had no shape and answers that hummed just out of reach. The woman traced the curve of the man's shoulder as he slept, patterns shaped like the fruit she could not taste. The man murmured names for things the world had not yet made. Dominion hinted at authority. Authority suggested choice. Choice whispered of knowing. Knowing pointed back always to the tree. The presence watched them with a tenderness edged with sorrow. Freedom was a gift, and gifts cannot bind. To be made in the divine image was to stand on the threshold of possibility and danger. As days passed, the tree's glow deepened, its fragrance drifting farther, its branches heavy with ripeness that seemed to lean toward the couple like an invitation. Evening gathered under the boughs in dark pools. Morning broke with fruit, glistening like drops of untouched fire. The garden inhaled their nearness, its harmony trembling as if anticipating a note that had not yet been played. The world held its breath, caught between innocence and awakening. The presence exhaled. The garden inhaled, and creation waited silently for the moment when longing would finally reach out and touch. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. The knowledge settled over them like frost, spreading across a window pane delicate, beautiful and unbearably cold. What once felt warm and familiar now cut at every angle, sharpened by the clarity Thea had never asked to carry. The man and the woman stood trembling in the garden, fig leaves pressed against their skin, not to shield from wind or light, but from the piercing vulnerability of being suddenly seen. Shame bloomed quietly in their chests, a creeping vine with hidden thorns that pricked inward, drawing a pain no hand could wipe away. Their laughter, once effortless as birdsong, fell silent, replaced by the hush of hearts learning fear for the first time. They walked the paths they once knew, but their steps were heavier now. Eyes avoided the gaze of every beast, every gentle branch, every innocent fruit. Even the river betrayed them, reflecting their altered forms with ruthless honesty. The sky above, once a comforting dome of blue, now felt distant, stern. The stars watching like witness issue offered no comfort. And then, in the cool of the day, the presence walked in the garden. The sound was soft, a rustle of leaves, a footstep like wind brushing grass. Birds lifted suddenly into the air, as if they sensed a question forming beneath the canopy. "Where are you?" The voice came not as thunder, not as accusation, but as a gentle call, the call of someone who already knows the hiding place yet still asks. The man stepped forward slowly, heart hammering, fig apron trembling with each breath. "I heard you in the garden," he whispered, "and I was afraid, because I was naked, so I hid." Fear, newest element in creation, a word that had never existed until this moment. The presence listened, and the truth unspooled like thread. The fruit, the serpent, the taking, tasting, blame passed from hand to hand like a shadow at dusk, from man to woman, from woman to serpent, from serpent to dust. Judgment followed, not shouted, but spoken with the sorrow of it, made the leaves tremble. To the serpent, the curse of crawling, of enmity, of striking and being struck throughout all generations. To the woman, the pain of birth woven into the joy of it, the tension of desire woven into the bond of partnership. To the man, the ground turning stubborn beneath his hands, thorns where flowers had once bloomed, bread earned by the sweat of the brow until the day he returned to the dust from which he came. The serpent coiled low in the shadows, accepting its fate with glittering eyes. The tree of life stood silent now, its fruit no longer within reach, a promise barred behind mercy and fire. And then, with quiet tenderness, the presence clothed them not with leaves, but with the soft skins of beasts given over in silent sacrifice. Warmth replaced the cold of shame, but not its memory. Together, they walked to the garden's edge. The gate stood half open, boughs of thorn arching above like a crown woven in both grief and grace. Behind them, the garden folded itself away, paths closing like pages, rivers continuing their course without waiting for Namas they would never hear again. Before them stretched wilderness vast, unshaped, beautiful in its uncertainty. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Mountains rose like questions. Winds carried scents of wildness and survival. Cherubim took their place at the gate, their flaming sword turning in every direction, a barrier of fire, a sentinel of mercy, ensuring that the path back would never be taken blindly. And so the couple stepped forward. The soil was firmer here, colder, resistant, but they walked hand in hand, their fingers clasped like an anchor against the unknown. Behind them, the gate closed with a sigh of branches, and the garden song faded into memory. Above them, the stars, the same stars, now charted the long road of exile, The moon offered its quiet silver fur, nights of fear and hope intertwined. Fall was not only an ending dot, it was a beginning, a long arc, bending toward return, toward promise, toward story. The presence watched from just beyond the gate. Sorrow in the severing, hope in the horizon, a mercy hidden even in the exile. And as the evening deepened, and the first night beyond Eden gathered around them, the breath moved on the wind once more, a whisper for wanderers. Gentle and vast, the man and woman walked on, hand in hand, into a world not yet written, their choices the ink, their steps the script, the garden forever behind, and the long journey of humanity beginning with the soft crunch of feet in untamed earth.